call this meeting of the Enterprise Committee to order. It is 11 o'clock. I'm here with Chair Dave Jackson and Vice Chair Dick Trainey and Amy Dabowski.
I'm on the phone.
All right. It's all yours.
Okay.
This is the report, Amy.
Yeah, for the record, Todd Coles, Port Engineer with the Port of Anchorage. This morning we wanted to give you an update on two recent and important efforts that we've made some good progress on. That being the test pile program that I know you've heard about and we undertook this season, and then a recent 2-day partnering session that we conducted with the Corps of Engineers to help chart the path forward, particularly on the permitting side of the project.
Before we go too far, do you have a handout?
I do. I provided it.
Maybe I and Daryl.
There it is. Oh, there it is. Yep.
All right, thank you. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Okay. All right, got it.
Yeah.
He needs one for each hand.
We have extras. We have plenty. So first, let's drill into the test pile program. This slide describes all the elements of the scope of that work and who helped us perform those elements. Starting with the geotechnical data gathering at 5 locations near the existing marine terminals where we had some data gaps that we wanted to fill from a geotechnical perspective. This work was part of the work that Kiewit was awarded under their construction contract, and their subcontractors that assisted were Denali Drilling on the drilling side and Golder Associates to do the geotechnical data gathering. Kiewit also installed 10 representative test piles at 4 locations at the port, and the next slide will be a diagram of where that happened. Helping them on the installation to evaluate the pile drivability was Robert Miner, and also to estimate the pile structural capacity. Robert Miner also assisted with that. AECOM captured marine mammal monitoring data during the installation, and JASCO captured and evaluated hydroacoustic noise attenuation data and methods that we experimented with. On in-air noise, we, through our project management consultant team, CH2M and HDR, gathered in-air noise data and ground vibration monitoring data, and we'll talk more about all this later in the presentation. We did extensive stakeholder outreach, which consisted of meetings. We even had a site visit event for the Government Hill community we hoped it occurred during some pile driving, but the pile hammer actually had some issues that afternoon. But anyway, we had an event there overlooking the site that we wanted to help inform the neighborhood on how we were gathering in-air noise data. And we had some of the equipment and some of the folks there to help answer questions. And then we've had extensive weekly email updates during the work, and port website updates as well to keep people informed as to our progress. Later, to conclude the work, our project management consultant team is developing a report of findings to basically put a finishing touch on everything and make interpretations for how this went, what we should be thinking about as we move forward with future work. This slide shows the locations of the test pile and geotechnical work. The geotechnical boring locations are what is kind of in an orange color, noted with the G terminology. You can see that we did 5 borings off the existing terminal to get better data. And then the test pile locations are noted with the blue leaders and location numbering. You can see that test pile location number 1 was just at the north end of Terminal 3, which is the tote terminal. We didn't use these 2 locations at Terminal 2 because they would have become too much of a conflict with Matson's operations. We ended up moving the piles that were scheduled for those locations into the others. So we had 2 other locations in the vicinity of the petroleum terminals, and then 1 location in the vicinity of the future petroleum cement terminal. That's location 6. And what we also note here is the different types of hammers that we used, whether it be hydraulic or diesel hammers, and what type of sound mitigation equipment, whether it was the confined bubble curtain or the resonator panel system that I'll describe in a little bit more detail here in a minute. And we note the depths that we were able to drive those pile to. So all in all, that was successful. We were able to get the piles to the depths that we wanted. To describe a little bit more on the hydroacoustic side, we first want to establish a baseline noise. You know, what does the inlet sound like when we're not driving pile? And then, as I mentioned, we evaluated 2 types of mitigation systems, the confined bubble curtain system and a resonator system. It's somewhat new technology. It's been deployed in the North Sea and used to some success there. We wanted to see whether it was useful at our location. Our approach was, as I mentioned, using different types of hammers. To start the pile, you use a vibratory hammer to start the pile. It turns out that type of hammer is actually more impactful to beluga whales than impact driving. So we're limited to a 50-foot depth of embedment with the vibratory hammer before we have to switch to either a hydraulic or diesel hammer. And then we monitored the noise of this operation at various distances from the source. We had fixed monitoring location underwater, 10 meters away, and then 1.5 kilometers away. And then we had a boat that was a random drift that was really trying to dial in on what's called the zone of insonification, where the noise level drops off to a non-impactful level. And so we did some random drifting to help pin that down. This slide diagrams the area that we're talking about as far as that area determined by National Marine Fisheries Service at the representative decibel level to be impactful of the beluga. On the left is the vibratory pile driving zone of insonification. The decibel level of concern for level B harassment, which is changing the behavior of the animal, harassing it, is 125 decibels. That take us out a 4-kilometer radius from the site, so all the way out to the Turnagain neighborhood beyond Ship Creek. So a fairly big zone that we had to monitor for whales in that area while we were doing the operation, and potentially would have had to shut down should a beluga have popped up in that area during vibratory hammering. On the impact side, the decibel levels, the allowable decibel levels is higher. I think it's 160 decibels, and the zone of concern is tighter to the site. I think it's about 1.5 kilometers. So that gives you a perspective of the range of area that is being monitored during the various pile driving activities. These are some graphics that show the types of noise suppression systems. The confined bubble curtain system you see on the top, essentially you surround the pile with a shield, and you using a air compressor create a bubble curtain inside, which would help dissipate sound levels. We have to confine that because of the flow in Cook Inlet would disperse the bubbles, so confining that is necessary.
All the way to the bottom?
Yeah, go all the way to the bottom. The resonator system that I mentioned, there's some graphics there on the bottom of that slide. It's very similar to a Venetian blind. It deploys, as you see on the right-hand side there, it deploys all the way to the bottom. The resonator panels, I brought a sample of one. You can picture these being about, I'd say, 6 feet long by maybe 16 to 24 inches wide in this arrangement around the pile. These are oriented in the horizontal, and the idea is it's called Helmholtz resonance, and it's similar to blowing across a bottle top where you observe a noise or a sound change. The idea is with these this shape of resonator that you can reduce certain frequencies as the sound travels through that blind, and would help mitigate the noises generated. So that gives you an idea of what that's all about.
Do you rent these? Do you buy these?
The manufacturer that fabricated for this project. They size these resonators for the sound that's anticipated.
For each project specifically?
So it was project specific, and in the North Sea, they might have been installing much larger diameter caissons, so they'd create much larger curtains of these resonator panels. Since our pile were 4 foot on diameter, they were able to tighten that up around each pile.
Drive one pile at a time?
We were driving one pile at a time. We just
So
did
you only
10.
had to buy one, you can use it over and over.
Exactly, right. Now, if perhaps if it made sense, you could make a larger curtain that would surround a whole pile group. That's a possibility. So these, that's something that if this proves out as being effective, and we're not yet certain that it was, that we're still in the data analysis, those could be some things that are explored to make it more feasible. But in this application, we just surrounded each pile as we were driving it. This graphic shows the in-air noise monitoring locations that we deployed primarily around the residential areas that are neighboring the port. We had 2 permanent locations that were stationary and installed throughout the progress. Those stations also gathered meteorological data, so wind speed, humidity, atmospheric conditions that might affect sound transmission. And then we had mobile equipment that would visit the locations throughout the course of the work, gathering site-specific data that could then all be correlated at the end. And we did that in a couple locations on Government Hill, Browns Point Park, and then Susan Nightingale Park. And then we worked with Jay Bear to gain access to the Cherry Hill development, and we did that in a couple locations there as well. And you can see, again, on the graphic, the purple stars are where we were driving the pile. Gives you an idea of the relative separation between the activities in the neighborhoods.
Just plain music to mask the sound.
Yeah. And then we also, we were interested in the potential impacts to those that work at the port, since we're doing this work during the normal business day by and large. And port admin is right down very close to where we're driving pile, as are other users such as the stevedore buildings on the terminals and some of our other stakeholder office and maintenance buildings. So you can see we gathered both interior and exterior noise data at those locations to put the sound levels in perspective and make sure there weren't any areas of concern. So just a quick status update. Kiewit demobilized on June 30th. Their final report is due to us by the end of this month. CH2M Hill and HDR's report of findings is due by the end of September. We want to follow up with our stakeholder engagement by outbriefing the Government Hill Community Council, our tenants, J Bear JL Properties, the Cherry Hill residential development, and then we've been given the Geotechnical Advisory Commission some informational updates as well throughout the project. So we want to be able to follow up with them on some of the geotechnical data gathering. So we are still crunching some of these numbers. But what it looks like at this point is that from a structural geotechnical perspective, the test pile program was very successful. All indications are we would expect to get the capacities we need and the depths of embedment required. On the sound attenuation side, we're a little uncertain on that right now. We want to do some more data processing, and that'll be done near the end of the month. So we'll be able to better quantify how successful bubble curtains or resonator panel systems are in helping mitigate the noise. And from an in-air noise perspective, we appears to have fallen right in the criteria established in the MOA noise code. We were under the sound thresholds for construction activities. So we were both for the OSHA standards that apply to folks working in the vicinity, who can use hearing protection outside, and interior noise was not over any threshold of concern, and likewise for the neighborhood. So we feel pretty positive on the in-air noise.
How about fisheries?
The fisheries?
Yeah, I know, mentioned the vibration.
The,
Surface noise.
we consulted Fish and Wildlife Service, which I think they're, and maybe one side of the National Marine Fisheries Service is also, because of the size of this particular test program, there wasn't any concern on their part with regard to fish impacts. That might be a bridge we have to cross a little bit further down the road when we're
Start doing work.
doing more piles. So any other questions on the test pile program before I move into the partnering?
Amy?
No, I don't have any questions. Thank you.
I have a couple. Did fisheries have observers? No. You said you didn't talk to fisheries. You were dealing with Fish and Wildlife Service.
Well, on the marine mammal side, we did have observers for the beluga whales, but we weren't required to do any monitoring on the fish side.
Impact of zonification. I'm not sure what my note was regarding that.
Yeah, that's the area which when we're undertaking the pile driving activity, we would expect to see levels within those ranges of concern. So within 4 kilometers of the pile driving for vibrocompaction, you would be required to monitor for marine mammal.
Yeah.
And if one popped up in that area or more, you'd have to shut down.
When we do it, I'm sure we're just doing it daylight hours or something.
Yeah,
Business hours.
there's constraints put on the time of day and the time of year so that you didn't have ice obscuring marine mammals as well.
I'm gonna have to talk with Mike at some point about money, where he's gonna, if he's gonna get a loan from local bank or what he's doing.
We'll take it from anybody.
Any other questions? Any other comments?
Well, let me touch real briefly on the partnering then,
All right.
because permitting is a light funding, probably the next most significant constraint on the project.
Yep.
We have to work not only with National Marine Fisheries Service and others, but the Corps of Engineers. And part of the Corps' support to permit the project from a Section 408 perspective is this project's potential impact on the federal dredging project. And a key element of the Corps' work is sedimentation modeling to help qualitatively predict how we might impact that. So we wanted to sit down with the Corps as early as we could to kind of communicate our project purpose and needs, so they really understood, and we knew they understood the importance of the project and some of the constraints we were faced with, primarily from a funding and technical perspective. We wanted to seek better understanding of the Corps' permitting processes. I mentioned Section 408. They also have authorities under Section 10, the Rivers and Harbors Act, and 404. So there's several pathways you have to go down within the Corps to get permitting ultimately. So we wanted to understand how these processes might integrate so that maybe it'd be more efficient to, one door to the Corps, so to speak. And then we wanted to start that coordination on the sedimentation modeling, because the Corps will be using their resources down in Vicksburg, Mississippi at the Engineering Research Development Labs in Vicksburg. And we wanted, they have models of our site already developed from previous work, how those models might be tweaked or enhanced to better model pile fields and the phasing that we're doing now. So we wanted to start that ball rolling, because that's a real critical path activity in the Section 408 process. I noted the participants. We had a fairly large group. Mike joined us to kick off and out-brief the event. Steve Rebuffo, our port director, and myself, and all of the project management consultant team leads from a project management and engineering, sedimentation, modeling perspective participated. And then we had all of our counterparts of the Corps of Engineers, from the deputy below Colonel Brooks, the chief of program and project management, the chief of engineering and operations, and chief of regulatory, and then all of their technical project management technical leads. So it was a good group, and as that picture shows, it was quite exciting.
One more. On that particular topic, did the Corps of Engineers express any concern about the fact that because we're going out deeper, we're gonna have to do less dredging? And what will be the impact in the overall bay and the cut in terms of us doing less dredging?
Less dredging was not their primary concern. Their concern is the possibility of having increased dredging quantities during the phasing of the project,
That's
or
right.
because we're building the new petroleum cement terminal out into the south.
Yeah.
So those are all things that the modeling we hope will be able to shed light on and provide confidence one way or another. So they are indicating an interest in cost sharing if increases look as though something that they'd be challenged with, but we really need the data to support that concern before we get too carried away with it. So we did the results of the partnering. We did really develop a much better understanding mutually of our individual scope, schedule, and budget constraints, whether it's on the project side or whether it's on the dredging side. And then certainly we got a better understanding of some of the process constraints that the Corps is required to deal with, and how we might be able to make more efficient engagement with them on that. So it was very productive. We established all the points of contact and issue resolution chain as issues crop up, how those will be grappled with between each agency. We established monthly technical meetings so that we can keep abreast of one, defining the schedule better, and then tracking it. And our next meeting is next week when the folks from ERDIC will be in town, and we'll be able to get some feedback from them on what they've been able to determine as far as getting the model spun up and ready to execute on. And then we've established quarterly top leadership meetings. That would be primarily between Mike and leadership at the Corps to stay plugged in at that top leadership level. And so we'll do that on a quarterly basis. So that's it in a nutshell as far as those two topics go.
The more dredging, let me see, do we pay for dredging alongside, when we have to have dredging alongside to get?
We do not pay for any of
Any
the
dredging.
Corps maintenance dredging. It's full federal expense at this
Then
point.
if they have to dredge less often, they ought to help pay for this, because it's gonna help save them some money.
That seems to reason, particularly if they're asking us to pay something if it causes more. So there's plenty of opportunity for successful negotiation.
My concern would be at the cut, they have to dredge the cut too to keep minimum drafts to get vessels in and out.
Right.
And I was just worried about the sedimentation, whether or not us not dredging might mean there's more to transport out that direction.
Just kind of add for general knowledge, we do pay, we have it a couple of times in the last 2 years, had some wintertime sedimentation when there's no dredge around. And, for the more winters we've been having, they have been coming up earlier, so we've had some situations where the winter survey will show, especially in front of the tow terminal, that it's just getting too deep. So we have paid Cook Inlet Type of Barge to come in and do what we call a prop wash.
Yeah.
And they come in, they back up
Blow
to
it out.
it and just rev those engines and blow the sediment around and about. It's a stopgap interim measure, but, we need to keep that customer satisfied. So the port does pay for that out of port money if that situation arises.
Mike, where are we gonna get the money to do the work?
We got lots of ideas for you, Mr. Chairman.
All right.
Still have some options at the state level. We're still, you've been briefed on the status of the litigation effort to recover funds from the designers and the constructors that were engaged in the port expansion project. And we've used some port resources already, obviously, and we're prepared to consider using more.
Are we changing schedules? Is it hurting us to not have the funding available? I'm sure you're looking
No.
at a balance between the legal costs
Yep.
and what we may ultimately get.
We are fully funded for what we're calling the next phase of the project, which is the construction of the new POL 1 dock at the southern end of the facility, and for the removal of a portion of the port expansion, the northern expansion project. That can be funded, or that will be funded by the $110 or so million that we have remaining from previous funding. Within a year from now, we do need to have secured funding, or at least an expectation of funding, for the next steps if we want to maintain the project schedule that we have right now, which would be for the development of and the construction of the new marine terminals. So we have one more legislative session, we have another year of conversations with these other places to try to resolve that. So we're not slowing down yet, but we will if we don't have funding a year from now.
And I'm sure this is a top line item when we talk to legislators and the governor.
As you know, in our terms of capital budget requests, this was our only talking point.
Yeah.
So, and we had a productive session, certainly not one that yielded dollars, but we did have strong support from the leadership of the majorities to advance some form of state bond funding for us. It never got over the hump, if you will, and the governor remains strongly concerned about additional debt for any project, including this one. But we're hoping to improve that as well. Governor Walker's actually going to the port tomorrow. We're going to be giving him and a couple of his key staff folks a tour of the port and be able to put them on the boat, as many of you have been, to see the actual condition of the existing facility. So, all that goes to say that we're making progress, not the progress we had hoped to make when we were talking to you a year ago, but we are making progress. And we have not yet reached the critical path dates for the project. We are fully funded for the work that we are advancing right now.
Just on a side note, but it's something that you should be aware of. Totally different program, totally different situation. The small boat launch, which is also under our care control, is deteriorated, eroded quite badly. We've had a project in for a couple of years now, Ports and Harbors Grant Program, to get a match to fix that. And we were successful in this year's budget to get the 50% match. So, and the governor left that in. So, it's a side thing, but it's an important thing. Our senators and all our people launch out of there will see construction next year on repairing that whole launch.
Awesome.
So there was a state grant this year related to the port.
Yeah, and that's good news. Maybe they felt sorry for us since they didn't give us big money. Probably.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What was the match? How much was the 50% match?
It was $688,000 about.
Okay,
So
thank you. And if I could follow up with another question,
Yes,
Mr.
ma'am.
Chairman? The $5 million settlement, that went towards litigation, didn't it? I'm trying to remember, because I think that's.
Not directly, but it has that effect. It goes into the port's capital fund, and then you also supported a $9 million appropriation from that fund for legal defense
Right,
expenses.
so it was $5 million, and then we approved $9 million. That's.
And there's another, we've also discussed with you another settlement, which we believe is imminent, and obviously I'm not going to be able to talk more about that today.
Yeah, and we don't know what that's gonna be, but I was just trying to, bring to the table this afternoon, the $5 million and what's being done with it. Thank you, Mr.
Legal
Chairman.
costs is a big part of that.
Right.
Mr. Payne?
Mike, as we start to see restructuring the legislative composition, wanna make sure in November we get the new legislators. Because we're gonna have potentially a couple of former assembly members down, we wanna make sure they don't forget where they came from.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Dombrowski?
Sorry, I had to take you off mute. No, I don't have any questions. I just want to say that I do appreciate, Todd, all the detail. I did feel like I was back in science class, but I appreciated that. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
The test will be next week. Anything, yes,
Just
sure.
kind of clarify, so, and when you see the budget, the capital budget for the port, you'll see the line item for the ship repair launch repairs. And I just wanted to be aware where that was coming from, that was not related to stuff.
So legislators can say in clear conscience they gave us money for the Port of Anchorage.
Yes.
For the Ship Creek small boat launch, yeah.
I know, details are a problem for them, but
It doesn't help our major customer.
no, it doesn't.
All right, if that's it, then I'd like to move on. Thank you very much for a very informative briefing.
You're welcome. You get unplugged here?
Yeah, I didn't know I rationed this down.
Maybe just leave it there and need them all the time.
All I gotta say is ML&T better be on their game. That was like an A+.
Okay, A plus,
Wow.
briefing.
Here we
That's
go.
fantastic, thank you.
I know you've been doing great things over there at the
Oh, good.
Highway Services.
That's a good thing. Yes, that's really good. I'm glad to hear that.
Good start. Think about what you're gonna tell us.
I'm sorry, I have to leave because we have Senator Murkowski's staff for
Don't let her leave, make sure she has a check with me.
I'll work on it.
All right.
Open one, we've got budget plans. One, two, we've got Danish gardens. Where's enthusiasm at?
Short break here while we set up, Amy.
No problem.
We also have a 12 o'clock meeting here on budget. By the way, our committee.
Okay.
Anytime,
What's that?
anytime.
Take it away. Mark Spafford, Director of Solid Waste Services. I haven't been here since my confirmation at the end of May. I haven't really had the opportunity to stand in front of the assembly yet, which is you consider.
This is a friendly crowd.
Yeah. So Mark Spafford again for I think you were in person, LB.
No, if I may, Mr. Chairman, no, I was on the phone, and I'm just really pleased to finally meet you in person.
Oh, thank you, yes, I'm glad to be here. So this is, I just wanted to give a brief overview. I tried to limit my coffee intake to just one of those this morning. And just because of my attention span, I'll try to be as quick as possible, realizing that we all might have questions and other things to do after this. But just a brief overview. Obviously, why I'm here is because SWS is an enterprise fund. We have two separate utilities, disposal and collections. we have three different major facilities throughout the municipality. One is the transfer station in Girdwood. The other is the central transfer station, which I'm sure the majority of people are familiar with here in Midtown. And then there's the Anchorage Regional Landfill, where all solid waste for the municipality of Anchorage is disposed of. 2016 total staff, we've got about 104 full-time employees, and that's, that fluctuates a little bit with seasonals, but as far as positions, full-time FTEs on the books, that's what we have. Total budgets for 2016 is approximately $32 million, with about 2/3 on the side of disposal, 1/3 through collections. We're estimating to collect 38,000 tons this year of residential curbside collected solid waste, which that's, obviously that's the 20% of the collection area within a municipality that SWS is required to service. And we're estimating about 300,000, disposing of 300,000 tons at the landfill this year. One thing I learned, so when I first got there, I thought, okay, well, it's solid waste, right? It's the landfill. That's kind of the biggest deal, biggest component of what we do. When in reality, obviously it's a big component, but what we really do, the majority of our staff are in the business of, is driving trucks. And so we're either driving to pick up residential waste, recyclable material, or transporting the material between the transfer station and the landfill. So the majority of our activities are focused on trucking. But I didn't think about that until after I started, and had some staff there saying that, well, this is in reality a trucking company, not so much a solid waste company, so.
Have you got your license yet?
Not yet. Because of that whole attention span and, I don't really have all that it takes to be a driver. There's a lot of, I could never do what those guys do as far as, collecting, doing the automated collection routes, driving something that big, backing something that big as much as they do. It's a difficult task to do, especially for the residential and the recycling guys that are picking up curbside, because there's just so many things that are involved related to, kids, animals, cars, snow, you name it. There's all kinds of pitfalls and things out there that can cause accidents. But we'll start with the disposal. Again, we do about 1,200 tons per day on average at the Anchorage Regional Landfill, which in pounds, that's like 2.4 million pounds, just to put it in perspective. Besides hauling solid waste, to the transfer station, and from the transfer station out to ARL, we also haul about 25 million gallons of leachate that's collected from the landfill to the Anchorage Water and Wastewater Utilities disposal location located at Turpin. And so that equates to about 5,000 truckloads on an annual basis.
Interim question here.
Sure.
Hazardous waste. With marijuana starting up, we just left a meeting dealing with grow cultivation. And they said their plans are to concentrate some of it into hazardous waste. Where would they take that and dump that off at? Out at the E River facility, or where does that go?
We haven't dealt with that issue specifically of solid waste. Yep, I agree. But we have a household hazardous waste collection facility that's located at the central transfer station as well as at the landfill. And disposal of that waste is something that's on our radar. However, we just haven't quite determined what the regulations are and how we're gonna deal with it when it starts coming in.
That's a suggestion. I would ask you guys to look at having to take it out to the Eagle River site rather than have to handle it a couple times. Because we don't know how much hazardous they're going to have. And I was talking to one guy today. He's planning on mixing marijuana that's left over with fuel oil. So then we got to figure out, okay, where can we put that sort of a mixture at? Because it's hazardous waste. So you look at that. The other thing is getting into your transfer station. We used to drive right by the restaurant there.
You
guys shut that off a while back. Now the restaurant's shut down. Can we bring the traffic? Because I get complaints a lot of times from people. Why are you guys forcing us to go to 50 to get into there?
That's something that I can look into. I didn't realize that was the
Because we're doing that a
emergence of
long time
traffic.
before that restaurant started out.
And so the logic behind moving the entrance location for the public disposal, the public wall, was to minimize the traffic at the sourdough mining company?
Correct.
Okay.
That's when we pushed everything onto 54.
55th.
And then frequently, the traffic on 54th would be enough to where it would actually back up onto Old Seward. And that led to the use of the self-storage yard that we bought, 8 or 10 years ago. And now we sort of queue the cars through the
They meander.
self-storage area. Right, it's just a way to keep cars out of the high volume rights of way. The big one being Old Seward. But we can look into whether or not, now that the sourdough mining company has closed, whether we could use the access off of International Airport again.
You take a look at it, please. Since it's my assembly district, I get a lot of calls, complaints from people. Why are you having us go over Hill and Dale? It's a straight shot down there and that place is closed. So thank you. But I am concerned about the marijuana from the hazardous waste because we've been approving more cultivation licenses starting up and they're gonna start to send their hazardous waste to you. We've gotta have a plan in place for where this stuff is dropped off at. I'd rather it's only dropped off once rather than at the transfer station and take it trucked out to the site. Thank
Well,
you.
I wanna wait for questions if we can. Did you have something? Amy, we're gonna wait till the end for questions.
That sounds good.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Okay. And again, that the transferring of leachate to and from the disposal station at Turpin from the landfill, represents about 5,000 truckloads a year. And Central Transfer Station, a location that we're obviously familiar with, is our main transfer truck location. So it's the primary location where drivers report and go back and forth between CTS and ARO. So I'm sure everyone is also familiar with the landfill gas collection system. And I just I'd like to try to use humor every once in a while, to, not get too heavy or anything like that, but I just thought this was funny. Our head engineer threw this out there as something that, Arnold, it's time to take out the trash. We're starting to run a little low on that thing. So, our trash is, someone else's trash is our treasure, so.
Sure.
Obviously, another big part of of our disposal operation is the landfill gas to energy project, which all the gas, we try to collect as much gas as we can that's coming out of the landfill and transport it over to our friends at Doyon Utilities so that it can be processed and turned into electricity for the Fort Richardson side of J-Bear. Approximately 100% of the electricity produced during the winter months is used by Fort Rich, and 60% during the summer months is used at Fort Rich during the summer months. So it's a pretty good utilization. Another big piece of the disposal operation is the environmental compliance piece of it. The majority of environmental compliance is centered on groundwater wells, monitoring groundwater wells, making sure that we're in compliance with state water quality regulations. And speaking of the landfill gas, another one is our air permit monitoring. So the less methane that we're collecting, the more we're in violation of that permit. So we want to try to collect as much of that methane as we can, or landfill gas, so that we're transporting as much as we can to Doyon, we're flaring off whatever we can't use, and we're keeping fugitive gas emissions from the site to a minimum as possible. Because every complaint that comes in, we have to work closely with, again, the state regulatory agency to address what those concerns are. But our last inspection, which was completed this year, we got a 99.6% as far as compliance is concerned. So I was pretty proud of SWS and all the staff there for making my job easy as far as that's concerned. So good job to them. Financial disposal, Our revenues are expected to be pretty close to what we budgeted for this year. As far as operating expenses are concerned, we've had some savings related to fuel costs being lower than we expected, we budgeted last year. Everything else is trending as usual. I think there's some of you are probably familiar with the care and closure liability, long-term care fund, that's fully funded.
Fully funded in this year's budget.
Right, yeah, fully funded for this year, yep. It's all about the Benjamins, so. The second part of solid waste services, the refuse collections utility. Again, we collect about 20%, we have 20% of the customers within the MOA. One of the exciting things that we have going on in refuse collections is the automated collection vehicles. So I'm sure everyone here, most people are familiar with the transition from can and bag service to automated collection vehicles. I think we're down to just a few hundred residents or customers that are still on can and bag service. And we'll hopefully be finishing that off and transitioning those customers to automated collection routes by the end of this year. So that's exciting because that was another thing is like, I never thought about it again until I got there. Staff there for years were throwing bags of solid waste into the back of a vehicle, and how someone's body could, stand that for a long period of time is just beyond me. We've got employees there that have been there 20, 30 years and have had both shoulders repaired. So this was a really, really good thing, not only for efficiency purposes, but also for the health and safety of the employees by keeping them out of the streets and having to toss, 40, 50 pound, bags of solid waste into their collection vehicles. The other piece that's really exciting is we're getting ready to deploy an onboard computing system. It was kind of halfway done before I got there, but basically what the onboard computing system is going to do is take away all that paper that you see in the left-hand corner. So basically when a driver gets into a vehicle now, they've got a 3-ring binder that has every stop they're supposed to get on. And they have to sit there and make notes, for instance, when somebody doesn't have their can out or there's a car blocking it or something like that. And so basically it's going to get them to the point where they're no longer having to use paper, and it's going to be completely contained on a computer screen that's going to track vehicle location, track each can that gets disposed of into the vehicle. It'll also provide real-time data to supervisor staff. It'll provide real-time data to customer service staff, so that way when a customer calls in and says that their can wasn't picked up that day, that customer service, instead of having to call on the radio out to the driver or to the driver's supervisor, will be able to look directly into our customer service program and see what actually happened and be able to talk real time with the customers there and reduce the amount of handing a customer off to somebody else to try to address the problem. So I'm pretty excited about that. New technology is always good, especially when it helps us be more efficient and serve our customers better, which is very important. Financial outlook for collections, it's a little bit better than disposal. Again, all of our expenses are tracking with what was budgeted for this year. And we've also had a little bit of a boom from depreciation being a little bit lower, and that's because of capital purchases that were deferred in the past, such as vehicles. But we're looking good as far as tracking on our budget for this year. So next, a big piece of the solid waste services is customer service. So the one expectation that I've let all staff know personally is that it is extremely important. The number one thing that they can do is make sure that all customers, when they're coming to our facilities, are taken care of and that they leave feeling good and with a good feeling about coming in and working with solid waste services and municipality as far as disposing of their solid waste is concerned. Now, of course, it's nice to say that. It doesn't always work that way. However, staff there knows that that's my expectation of them, and they need to do everything that they can to make sure that that customer is greeted properly, taken care of, and that their questions and concerns are addressed as soon as possible. And that's primarily falls on the shoulders of customer service and that staff. Of course, customer service, like any of the other utilities, they answer calls, provide information to customers, take payments. also led outreach efforts with the Government Hill Bear Can. I wasn't here for that last year. However, I know when I walked in the door in April, it was a topic of great discussion. It's not always that no news is good news. However, I haven't heard any customers or any kind of complaints rising to my level yet about the Bear Can pilot program. So I take that as a good thing. So with the cans that we're doing, the outreach that we did this year, it appears that it's working. I haven't heard anything from our collection drivers regarding pickup of those cans. So, at the end of October, after bear season's done and we go back out and pick up those cans, we'll be able to make a more educated decision or decide what we're going to do different, if anything, for next year. And then obviously customer service, they assist us with public outreach and education, which is pretty important, especially given the complexity of recycling. Administration group is basically consists of the director's office, our finance staff that takes care of budgeting, as far as operating capital is concerned. Again, our customer services, we have a recycling coordinator who helps us with outreach, looking at how we're doing recycling, managing those relationships that we have with our partners here in the community as far as recycling is concerned. And of course, an IT liaison who helps us try to address IT issues that we have as they pop up. I don't know, for some reason we've had a lot of barbecues. We've had a lot of opportunities to cook out, which is always nice to have that at SWS. So I kind of got sick of hamburgers and hot dogs between what was going on at work, other places around the municipality, as well as at my house. But it's a good group that works there. I feel, one of the main reasons I went to work there is because of how tight-knit that group is and how willing they were to help out and want to see the right thing done. So they have a good culture there of helping each other out in times of need, as well as trying to spread and encourage a better morale for the entire workforce. So it's a fun place to work. Every day I go there.
We're gonna need to get in. I've got questions from pretty much everybody, but I'm glad to haven't run you off yet. And I've got some questions too if we get to them, but otherwise, Dick.
So I'm looking at, again, back to marijuana, I'm looking at the state requirements. They've got to mix the solid waste they produce with 50% clean fill soil and unused paper products. And some want to mix it with motor oil. So within a month, can you give us what your plans are going to be? You're dealing with hazardous waste. Because this is going to be coming online rapidly. And we have no idea how much is going to be produced here yet, but we do need to have a program in place so when they come to you and say, we've got some marijuana, solid waste, you guys know what you're going to do with it.
And we need to know what to tell them.
Yep.
At this point.
So, within a month, if you can give us the answer, I'd appreciate that. The other thing is the methane production. How many generators do we have online? Is Joyanne using now? Is it one time they were going to add another one to it?
There's 5 generators there currently, which produce 7 megawatts.
Okay, we're still flaring gas off.
Yes, yep, so 60% of the electricity, basically we provide 60% of the power to Fort Ridge during the summer. The remainder of the gas is flared off. During the winter months.
So was putting another generator in there and producing more electricity rather than flaring the gas off?
That's one thing that we're approaching with J-Bear and Doyon and trying to work through those details. Because yeah, we would obviously rather, we would want to encourage a more beneficial use of that rather than just flaring it off.
Do we have the capability of producing more electricity than putting it back into the grid? Or does it just have to go to J-Bear?
Our current contract says that J-Bear gets it.
But what if J-Bear doesn't want it, then can it go to MLMP?
It can. The gas would have to be processed for it to be able to go into the natural gas grid in the rest of Anchorage. Right now, the landfill gas comes out and it's relatively poor quality. There's a lot of other stuff other than just methane in there, and Doyon's equipment is set up so that it can use it in that condition, which is great. Saves everybody money in terms of having to do that. But if we put it into the NSTAR pipeline, which is what it would take to get it to either N-Star users or MLNP or any of the other generators, we'd have to do a lot of processing. And that's one of the reasons why having essentially an on-site generator or generator just across the fence makes the gas particularly valuable.
Could we then put another generator there and take the electricity that was produced by this other generator and move it into the grid?
We could, and if it long term, it looked like Doyon was not going to use the gas and wasn't going to make the investments themselves to convert it to electricity, then we probably would. But right now, our expectation is that Doyon will continue to grow their generation capability to absorb our gas.
When I was there last time, there was a spare generator sitting on the side, and they were saying they couldn't use it. It may be like there's 5. I don't know if there were 5 or 4.
And we're flaring gas off.
But it could only take that more without changing out the building structure and do.
It would be good for them to find out and let us know, because I don't want to keep flaring gas off.
We can provide you with a report
Sure.
that's with, based on our understanding, of Doyon's expectations.
Would please. Other thing is, we have a lot of poaching going on in our solid waste area by other waste organizations, because we don't provide that service with some of the dumpsters. And at one time, there was talk about getting bigger dumpsters in here, so that we couldn't have other companies poaching. Are we still pursuing that?
We're still looking at, one of those service areas is commercial recycling. And so I'm missing a meeting right now discussing that internally about how to do that. This is more important. But we're restarting that process. So it's just taken a little bit of time for me to figure out what was going on previous to me being there. Commercial recycling was one of those. We're looking at that right now, and we're also reevaluating the roll-off. Just updating the business plan that was completed.
Just let us know on the roll-on, roll-off, because you'll have support from a significant amount of assembly members. If it takes investment in buying the roll-on, roll-off, I'd like to see us doing that, rather than letting that money go away to other companies.
I do have some questions for Amy, but LD, do you
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I do, and I'll be quick. Let me just start out by saying, I can't remember seeing in my record as happy as you are to be in the room. Like, that's like, it's a really nice feeling. I'm talking to you, young man. So, anyway, and I'm really, really glad to see the emphasis that you have on customer service, because your customers are our constituents, so I really appreciate that. You mentioned the long-term care program. Tell me a little bit about that, because I'm kind of missing what that is.
That's the fund that basically after ARL is closed, that's the money that the utility is required to put away to take care of, capping the landfill, as well as the 30+ years of groundwater monitoring and surface emission, methane and landfill gas
Okay.
monitoring.
Thanks, now I remember. Okay, and one last question. Because of the automated pickup now, workers' compensation cases have dropped. Can you give us some numbers? You don't have to do it today, but can you give us some numbers?
Yep, Mike and I talk about that every time we meet, actually, so.
Great, so-
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Amy, we have a few minutes here. If you've got a couple quick ones.
I do. First, do you have any unforeseen challenges that you're dealing with? You said everything's on budget, but is there anything on the radar that you think we should be aware of, just kind of put in the back of our minds that you're watching?
I didn't hear that.
Amy, I can start. This is Mike Abbott, and then Mark can add in. The only large risk item that I'm aware of right now is there is still the continuing litigation with Eklutna Incorporated over the sort of who gets the value from the natural gas generated from the landfill. So the Assembly was briefed on that, I think, a couple of months ago on the status of that. There's a trial date in later this fall. So
Yeah, I remember that. Okay, nothing else of note then. Mike, maybe it'll just be easier if you answer these really quick. Have we made any progress on taking credit or debit cards at the landfill?
We are accepting credit cards and debit cards now.
Oh, we are now. Great, that's wonderful. And then when we were talking about the bear cans, did you just, so obviously you ran them this summer. I know last time we talked about the actual cans, there was discussion of what type of can you were going to use. Obviously you made a decision. And we could probably get some feedback at our next meeting or in a couple meetings then about which direction long-term you'll go, is what I'm gathered.
Yeah, we're a couple of months into the test right now. Certainly by the end of the year, we can give you a report on how it's gone.
Great, great. And then I think something that would be helpful for me if the chair is amenable to it. For me, when you come to us, I think the most effective use of our time would be if we could clearly highlight what the challenges are, maybe current and potential emerging challenges within SWS. Also, I think for me, the important thing is the community relations aspect. I loved hearing that customer service was important, but if you have community campaigns going on, like awareness campaigns, that's helpful for us to know because we can disseminate those at our community councils too. And then the last thing, it would be helpful, especially because so much of SWS, we rely on equipment, trucks and all kinds of stuff. If we could get a look at your capital improvement program again and just talk about some of the big expenses you expect, because I assume with equipment and maintenance and all that, you guys are going to have a robust program. And off the top of my head, I don't remember what that looks like. So that might be a good topic for discussion in the future.
Okay.
All right, Amy, I'm gonna have to cut you off if we're.
Oh, I'm done.
We've got another meeting coming here. Mark, thank you very much.
Okay, I just, one last slide, which
All
is,
right.
just one real quick. My philosophy there is do something. That's what I tell staff to do, is do something, because what I want them to do is think of ideas like spaghetti on the wall. You throw some stuff up there, it's gonna stick, other stuff, most of it's gonna fall off, but we gotta try to find the stuff that sticks, and most importantly, they have to do something.
Plenty of room for creativity.
That's right, always. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman.